Hi, Embryona. My parents once told me I wasn't CEO material. They said it like they were handing me a napkin, not cutting me out of a legacy. But I didn't expect the sign outside the company or family company to lose my name overnight. Or the boardroom seat I earned, handed to my brother-in-law while I still handled payroll. They erased me from the will, then from the website, then from the photo on the wall. But when my 8-year-old niece asked if Uncle Orion was the boss now because he was just better, I realized this was just about business. It was a quiet execution, and I stayed silent until the day I didn't. What would you do if your own family rewrote your story without telling you? You can usually feel a room before you understand it. That day, I felt the shift the second I stepped into the boardroom. It wasn't just quiet, it was rehearsed. A silence that had been passed around and perfected, like an inside joke I wasn't part of. Elgin was already at the head of the table, his posture too relaxed, his gaze too neutral. His coffee black, no sugar still steamed in front of him. Fresh. He'd been here a while, long enough to settle, not long enough to drink. Across from him sat Isolde, expression unreadable, her pen poised as if she were about to sign a ceasefire agreement. Others lined the table, shuffling papers, murmuring pleasantries, pretending to review the agenda. But no one looked up. Not at me. Then I saw it. My nameplate, the brushed steel rectangle that had anchored my seat for the past 6 years, was gone. In its place, a newer plate gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Orion Feldman, CEO. Just like that. I froze, one foot slightly ahead of the other, still holding the lukewarm coffee I'd picked up from the break room, as if that version of the morning still existed. The room didn't wait for me to speak. Elgin cleared his throat. "We've made a change," he said, in the same calm, measured tone he used to suggest sandwich orders on Thursdays. "Orion will be stepping in as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately." Orion rose from his chair, smooth as theater. His smile was polished, too wide, too bright, the kind people practice in front of mirrors. "I'm honored to take on this role," he said. "Looking forward to collaborating with all of you closely." He meant over you, but no one blinked. I didn't speak. Couldn't. My body went through the motions. I moved toward an empty seat near the window, opened my notebook, clicked my pen. I didn't ask for my seat back. No one offered it. No one said my name. The meeting rolled forward like a train I was no longer allowed to board. Financials, forecasts, client targets. Orion stammered through numbers I knew by heart projections I had built, tested, refined. Isolde corrected him once or twice, gently, like she was easing a child through a piano recital. I kept my face blank. I wrote what I could, though I wasn't sure why. Out of habit, maybe, out of dignity. My pen scratched quietly against the paper, the only sign I was still there. When the meeting ended, I didn't wait. I stood, walked out without a word, straight to my office. Closed the door. The sound of it shutting seemed louder than it should have been. Everything looked the same, but nothing did. The books on my shelf, arranged by color. The succulent someone gave me when we signed our Series B. The ribbon-cutting photo, framed in matte black wood. All of it remained, but it wasn't mine anymore. Not really. It was a shrine, a fossil. My breathing turned shallow. I needed air, but not the kind you get outside. I needed movement. I needed to prove I still had control over something, anything. I walked to the admin print room, telling myself I'd forgotten a printout. A reason. Any reason. The room was empty. The copier hummed softly, its screen blinking idle. On the corner of the table, a folder lay unattended. A single sheet stuck out slightly, the corner bent like someone had pulled it out halfway, then thought better of it. Internal Transition Planning Executive Reallocation. The words landed like a punch to the throat. I opened it, slowly, carefully, like peeling back a wound. Inside were spreadsheets, rollout schedules, press templates, pre-written emails, detailed steps mapped out week by week, names assigned to tasks. My name appeared once, under logistical coordination. No input, no acknowledgement, no gratitude. The first document was dated 3 months ago. 3 months. That entire time, I'd been running full tilt pulling late nights, onboarding new staff, smoothing over client concerns, defending budget allocations. I'd turned down 2 vacations, missed my nephew's piano recital, stayed through a holiday snowstorm to finalize Q1. While they had been planning my exit, I felt myself sink onto the low cabinet beside the printer, the cold metal pressing into the backs of my legs. I couldn't tell how long I sat there, maybe 5 minutes, maybe more. The folder rested beside me, heavy with betrayal. Eventually, I stood, walked back to my office, and turned off the light. For a moment, I just stood there in the dim, staring into my own outline against the window. There was no breakdown, no yelling, just stillness, like the inside of a locked vault. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't about growth or direction or vision. This wasn't a mistake, I whispered to the dark. It was a strategy. And then I pulled out a blank notebook, the one I kept tucked in the back drawer, the one I hadn't opened in years. I uncapped my pen, and I started writing again. Not about projections, not about meetings, but about the truth. Mine. Because they may have taken the title, but I still had the story. They thought I would leave quietly. They didn't realize I was starting something. I didn't slam doors. I didn't yell. I wrote. I arrived early that morning. The parking lot was still half empty, the sun just beginning to warm the tinted glass on the west side of the building. I sat in my car for a moment, trying to decide if I felt more numb or more focused. The line between the two had blurred since Tuesday, but I walked in, head high. Like nothing had changed, because outwardly, nothing had. My badge still beeped green. My title still read COO in the HR system. My name was still on the directory, but I could feel it like a coat that no longer fit, but you wear anyway, hoping it might still button. In my office, I opened my laptop and waited for the familiar loading sound. Then I saw the email. Subject line, welcoming our new CEO, Orion Feldman. It was from Isolde, sent to all staff. The newsletter was glossy, corporate perfect, complete with a high-res headshot of Orion in the executive suite, sleeves rolled just enough to seem approachable. His innovative vision will guide Anderson Group into a dynamic future, it said. There was a paragraph about forward momentum, a section about global potential, and a quote from Elgin about Orion's strategic clarity. There wasn't a single mention of me. Not a line about continuity or thanks, or my 12 years of infrastructure work. I scrolled to the bottom. The sender list included me. They knew I'd see it. That was the point. A knock at the door startled me. My assistant, Erin, peeked in, eyes unsure. Hey, I didn't write the newsletter, she said quickly. Marketing drafted it. I just forwarded it like I always do. I nodded. You don't need to explain. But we both knew what had happened. I was no longer the subject of the sentence. I wasn't even a comma. I had become the silent space between paragraphs, present but unacknowledged. An hour later, someone from facilities stopped by. Hi, Briona, he said, half smiling. Quick heads up, they're moving Orion into the West Conference Room. The exec suite next to it will be converted into his private office. I stared at him. That room used to be my workshop, my overflow war room. I used to write on the whiteboards until my wrists hurt. He waited for a response. I gave him one. I'll move my things out by the end of the day. In the lobby, I needed air. Needed to move. I took the stairs instead of the elevator 4 floors down, then walked out toward the front desk, where natural light poured through the floor-to-ceiling windows. I stopped short when I saw it. 2 men in uniforms were adjusting the main lobby signage. Ladders were up. Dust was settling on the tile. The company name, Anderson and Daughters, had been polished away. In its place, Anderson Group reimagined for the future. It was subtle but deliberate, like someone erasing a middle name from a tombstone. I stared as one of the workers peeled off the last of the lettering. He didn't notice me, or maybe he did and didn't know what to say. A security guard behind the desk gave me a nod. The polite kind people give to someone who no longer holds power, but still walks like they might. I walked slowly back to my office, each step echoing. I thought about the first time that sign had gone up, gold leaf letters. Darla's, hand on my shoulder, whispering, "You'll carry this farther than we ever dreamed." I believed her, but now there was no shoulder, no words, just emails I wasn't meant to answer and signs I wasn't meant to stop. Back in my chair, I didn't cry. That part of me had been squeezed dry long before. I opened the newsletter one last time, reread it, then deleted it. Then I created a new folder on my desktop, Operations Log Legacy Notes. I began dragging documents into it, internal process maps, contract playbooks, revised budgeting templates, all mine. I knew where everything lived, every structure, every sequence, every shortcut that made this place function behind the scenes had my fingerprints on it. They thought I'd disappear. No. I was archiving the foundation they forgot. I knew, no, this wasn't just replacement. It was erasure. And I was done watching. I wasn't ready to confront them, not yet. But I wasn't about to play along either. So when Darla texted that we were still having our usual Saturday dinner, I didn't cancel. I went. Driving to the house in Edina felt like sliding back into a skin I'd already outgrown. The brick looked the same, the shrubs were trimmed just like always. But the second I stepped through the front door, I felt it, that tight, staged energy. The kind you feel at funerals when people smile too much to avoid crying. Darla was in the kitchen, humming something cheerful and slightly off-key. Isolde's laugh floated from the dining room, sharp and performative. Orion's voice followed, a smooth baritone about new branding strategies. It was like they were filming a commercial and forgot to tell me I was no longer part of the cast. I excused myself to the study, while Darla stirred a pot of something meant to smell like comfort. The room still smelled faintly of her lavender oil diffuser and Elgin's old cigar box. Same leather-bound books, same faint scuff on the floor, where his office chair always dragged too wide. But the photos had changed. One frame, newer than the others, caught my eye. Gold-edged, clean, centered perfectly on the shelf. It was a picture from the annual company Galeone I had planned down to the napkin colors and AV scripting. I was there that night. I remembered the exact dress I wore, the extra flats in my tote bag for when the heels wore me out. I remembered coordinating Orion's talking points backstage while he practiced in the mirror. But I wasn't in the photo. The image showed Elgin, Darla, Isolde, and Orion standing in front of our branded step and repeat backdrop, arms linked, all teeth and confidence. I had stood just off to the right in the original. I remembered because I had handed Orion a lint roller moments before it was taken. Yet in this version, I was cropped out, literally. The right edge of the photo was sliced clean me sleeve, my shape, my part in it, gone. Darla appeared in the doorway just as I leaned closer. "That's the best shot we had," she said, her tone light, her smile breezy, like it hadn't just landed a punch. You know how those event photographers are, always cutting people off. I turned and offered a practice smile. Sure, but I wasn't stupid. I wasn't edited out by accident. I was edited out because I didn't fit their version of the story anymore. Dinner was bland. Not the food. Darla's sweet potatoes still carried the same nutmeg-heavy charm, but the conversation. It was like background noise written by an intern. Isolde led the room like she was hosting a podcast. Elgin offered the occasional grunt of approval. Orion talked about his upcoming interview with a regional business journal, how the timing couldn't be better for the rebrand. They spoke as if I hadn't just been scraped from the company wall. At one point, Isolde lifted her wine glass and said, "It's so great to finally have a face people trust at the helm." I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because something inside me quit and sharp clicked into place. I had been trying to understand what this was. Now I knew. They weren't just choosing someone else. They were choosing to forget I had ever been there to begin with. Later that night, in the room I used to sleep in during summers home from college, I lay on the guest mattress, staring at the ceiling fan blades slowly circling like they always did. My old bookshelf was still intact, but my frame degree had been replaced with a photo of Isolde and Orion at a startup conference. I picked up my phone and opened a note. Just 2 words. Proof matters. Because one day, someone would challenge the version of this story they were so carefully curating. And when that day came, I wouldn't be erased, it'd be undeniable. I wasn't lost. I was being buried, neatly, politely, and I wasn't about to let them finish the job. Monday morning started like it always did. I reviewed my notes, skimmed the weekly operations checklist I'd prepared, and gathered the folder I'd updated late Sunday night more out of habit than duty. That quiet part of me still hoped someone would notice I hadn't stopped working, hadn't stepped aside. But I knew better. The boardroom on the executive floor looked strangely quiet as I approached. No sound of laptops booting, no shuffle of coffee cups on the long mahogany table. I checked the time. I was early, but not by much. The meeting had always started at 9. I opened the door anyway. The room wasn't empty. Orion stood at the far end, clicker in hand, mid-slide. His voice dropped mid-sentence when he saw me. Isolde sat near the center, jaw tightening so slightly it was almost unnoticeable. The rest of the room followed suit, eyelets like dropped glass. No one said anything. No one offered a chair. I scanned the space. My usual seat, too, down from the head, was occupied by a junior marketing manager I'd mentored last year. She had the decency to look away. On the far wall, the screen displayed a new quarterly flowchart, a structure I recognized, one I built. An intern, no older than 22, stood awkwardly to the side and gestured toward a plastic stool near the trash can. "You can if you want, I didn't want." I stood. Watched. Orion cleared his throat. "Let's continue," he said too loudly. As I was saying, our Q3 strategy integrates a fresh operational funneliner, tighter touchpoints, simplified back-end management. He clicked forward. A new slide appeared. Color-coded boxes, precise arrows, department overlaps. All of it looked familiar. Too familiar. I'd drawn that exact workflow 3 months ago. My layout, my terms. Even the color scheme matched the custom palette I'd created for a client-facing deck. He hadn't changed the margins. No source credit, no acknowledgement, not a word. The room nodded along. Someone asked about analytics load. Orion answered with buzzwords he barely understood, repeating phrases I had coined. And when he stumbled over a metric, Isolde stepped in, smoothly adjusting the phrasing, handing him a term I'd used in our old strategy session. I scanned the room for a single ally. Not one person met my eye. At the end, Orion beamed. "That concludes the operational portion. Let's move to media." No one clapped, but no one questioned him either. After they adjourned, I waited until the last intern shuffled out. I walked to the whiteboard on the side wall, normally wiped clean between meetings. Today, it held 3 bullet points in dry erase ink: vendor streamlining, calendar consolidation, and account pivot logic. My handwriting. Still there. They hadn't even bothered to erase it before calling it theirs. I didn't speak. Didn't ask for an explanation. Instead, I pulled my flash drive from my jacket pocket, walked to the central console, and downloaded the full slide deck. Quietly. Efficiently. Back in my office, I set the flash drive on my desk and opened my notebook. I wrote 1 sentence in black ink, each word as deliberate as a signed check. Next time they use my work, they'll pay licensing. Then, I flipped the page and began a list. Everything that still ran because of me: projects, systems, clients, templates. Every foundation Orion now stood on had my signature buried in its seams. I would excavate them all. I wasn't looking to win a fight. But I wasn't planning to lose quietly either. The moment he called me too emotional for strategy, I knew he underestimated the one thing I never advertised: restraint. And that mistake was going to cost him. It started with a calendar ping at 7:12 a.m. Subject line: Stakeholder Review Room 4C. Sender: Isolde. No message, just the slot. It wasn't a standard invite, those came weeks ahead. This one was surgical, timed, precise. I stared at it for 5 seconds, maybe less, then clicked accept. The meeting was set for 11:30. By 8 I was at my desk, going over our last quarterly operations plan, margin projections, budget overruns, any lever I could pull, to remind them I was more than just an outdated title. At 10:15, I printed out my own report, labeled it in plain Helvetica, reality check. When I walked into room 4C, Orion was already standing at the front. Isolde sat directly to his left, flanked by 2 junior directors. The room was fuller than expected, 3 board members I hadn't seen in weeks, and a few senior managers who normally skipped these unless donuts were promised. "Glad you could join us, Briona," Orion said smoothly, gesturing toward an empty seat like it hadn't been saved just seconds earlier. I sat down. No handshake, no small talk. He launched into his presentation. "As we enter the final stretch of Q3, we're refining our narrative," he said, sliding through mock-ups of marketing blurbs, influencer headshots, and color-coded outreach tiers. The voice is younger, the tone decisive. We're removing friction. I held my tongue until slide 7. That's where the fantasy started unraveling. He described a streamlined vendor pivot model. His words. My strategy. "Quick question," I said, keeping my tone even. "How are we protecting against Q4 vendor backlog if you're dropping the redundancy cushion?" He paused, just for a beat, then smiled like a pastor who'd been asked about sin at a wedding. "I appreciate your passion, Briona," he said, eyes flicking toward the board, "but sometimes it's hard to take criticism seriously when it's emotionally charged." The air left the room. Nobody laughed. Someone coughed short, awkward, desperate for release. I didn't blink. "I'm sorry," I said, standing. "Would you mind if I clarify 3 items in your deck?" Orion shrugged. "Go ahead." I reached into my folder, pulled out the reality check packet, and laid it flat on the table. "First," I said, "the redundancy cushion isn't theoretical. It saved us $1.2 million during the February vendor fallout. Second, the friction you're referencing is actually a contract safeguard section 4B, paragraph 2, put in place after the Charlotte project almost defaulted. Third, and most important, emotion didn't write that policy." I did. I let that settle. One of the board members shifted. Another nodded faintly, eyes scanning my sheet. No one rushed to defend me, but no one defended him either. After the meeting, I left without gathering my things. I didn't need to. I knew what I'd brought to the room, and what I'd left there. Isolde caught up with me halfway down the hall. "Briona," she said, voice low. "That wasn't personal. Don't make it bigger than it is." I stopped, turned. "If it gets any bigger," I said, "it'll break your glass office." She didn't reply. Back in my office, I slipped off my shoes and sat quietly, pulled the flash drive from my coat pocket and plugged it in. Replayed the clip I'd recorded during the meeting. My voice, measured, clear. His? Smooth at first, then slippery. I saved the file under a new folder. Undermined publicly v1.wav. I stared at the screen. It didn't scream. It didn't threaten. It just existed. And that, I knew, was enough. The file sat quietly on my desktop, but it was the loudest thing in the room. They wanted silence. What they got was structure-papered, stamped, and backed by law. The message came in just before lunch. I was skimming my inbox, mostly vendor replies and auto notifications, when I saw the name. Carl Tillman, retired accountant, used to run our financial back end during the rocky years before the modernization. I hadn't spoken to him since the restructuring, but his email was short and clean. "I have something you'll want to see. Hard copy only. Meet me in the lower lot in 30. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed my coat, told Aaron I was stepping out for a few, and walked 2 blocks to the side parking structure. He was waiting in a dusty Buick, engine running. Didn't even look up when I slid into the passenger seat. He handed me a tan folder. "Confidential capital contributions." "Read it later," he said. "You didn't get it from me." Back at the office, I locked my door and opened the file. Page 1, a ledger entry. Year 2019. Line item $275,000. Memo. Emergency bridge OPEX buffer. My name was typed cleanly in the original contribution column. Page 2, a follow-up memo. Attached amendment. It had been relogged, folded into the General Executive Reserve, then reassigned recredited under Orion's financial backing, leveraging a clause I vaguely remembered signing in the early days. I had contributed a six-figure lifeline when the company was weeks from collapse, and now it sat on someone else's record as proof of leadership investment. I felt my stomach tighten, but I didn't panic. I got up, crossed the hall, and walked straight into the legal archives room. The lighting in there was always dim, the carpet just a little too thin. I sat down at the old research terminal, logged in, and began pulling up the original agreements. The clause was buried deep. Nestled under contingency consolidation, it granted discretionary fund reallocation under executive title transitions with no required notification to secondary contributors. Technically, they hadn't broken the rules, but they had bent them so far, the paper should have snapped. I took photos, all of it, printed 3 copies, saved one to my drive, left nothing open on the screen. As I was packing up, I checked my inbox again. That's when I saw it, subject line, Ops timeline, eyes only. It had been CC'd to me accidentally. A thread between Orion and Isolde. 5 emails deep, strategy talk, meeting prep. But then, there it was, clean and sharp. She's not a threat. She'll get tired and walk. I sat there for a long moment. Reading it, rereading it. I didn't respond. I didn't forward it. I downloaded it quietly, saved it in the same folder as the audio clip from the stakeholder meeting. Then I stood up, walked calmly back to my office, and wrote a single-line email to Orion. Per protocol, I am initiating a formal audit of all executive ownership transfers dated FY 2021 onward. I hit send. 10 minutes later, I heard a door slam across the hall. Hard. No one said anything. But even through the glass, I could feel the shift. For the first time in weeks, I felt the ground under me settle. They hadn't just crossed a line. They'd handed me the pen. That evening, as the sky darkened behind my window, I opened a new digital vault on my hard drive. Named it Foundations They Forgot. Inside it, I placed 3 files: the investment ledger, the email thread, the audio file. I stared at the folder icon for a long time. Then I opened a blank document and began writing a legal draft that would make them remember. They'd built a legacy on my silence. Now it'd use their own signatures to rewrite it. But before Monday arrived, before I made it official, I had to survive Sunday. It was Isolde's idea of family brunch at her place. No business talk, she'd texted. Just waffles and peace. I almost declined. But I wanted to see their faces. I wanted to feel what they looked like when they pretended we were still whole. Their house was bright, unnaturally so. Everything was curated, the playlist low and inoffensive. The scent of citrus candles thick in the air. Isolde buzzed between the kitchen and the patio table like she was auditioning for a hosting segment on morning TV. Orion played tag in the backyard with our niece Lila, who wore a unicorn headband and sticky maple fingers. Darla was already seated, pouring coffee like it meant something. Elgin, as always, was buried in his Sunday Times, reading as though the world depended on his silence. I took a seat quietly. No one asked about my week. No one mentioned the audit request. The table filled with food and empty conversation. Isolde talked about flooring samples for the office remodel. Orion mentioned how press opportunities were ramping up, which made Darla nod like she'd just seen a prophecy fulfilled. Then came the question. Lila, mid-sip of orange juice, looked up at me and asked, Aunt Briona, is it true you're not working at the company anymore because Uncle Orion is better at it? Time didn't stop, it tripped. Isolde's face froze mid-smile. Orion chuckled and looked down. Darla set her napkin gently on her lap. Elgin didn't move. I looked at Lila. Her question wasn't cruel. It was curiosity raw, honest, echoing what she'd heard at dinner tables or behind closed office doors. That was the worst part. I smiled gently. "Excuse me, sweetheart," I said, rising. I found the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the edge of the tub, and let my fists press into my knees. Not because I wanted to cry, but because I needed to hold something still, anything. They had rewritten the story so thoroughly that even an 8-year-old knew my chapter had been erased. I didn't stay long after that. I made some polite excuse about a contractor coming to look at the pipes in my building. No one asked if it was true. By evening, I was back in my apartment, my coat still on, boots leaving a trail across the hardwood. I didn't take them off. I opened my laptop and checked my messages. There it was, a LinkedIn message from Claire, an intern from 5 years ago. "Thought you'd want to see this? It's going viral." A link followed. I clicked. The post didn't have a byline, it simply read, "The woman who built a legacy and watched it be rebranded." Underneath were 2 paragraphs. One described a female executive who'd laid the operational foundation for a mid-size firm. The other described how her contributions were absorbed, her title reassigned, her presence vanished without conflict, only silence. It didn't say my name. It didn't need to. The comment section was a cascade. Former employees, vendors, anonymous profiles I didn't recognize, but I recognized the voices. She trained me. I still use her hiring process. We never missed a deadline until she stopped managing timelines. Funny how success looks like the guy who showed up last. I sat back. The light from the screen flickered across the framed certificate above my desk, the one they had once insisted I hang in the lobby. I stared at it and felt nothing. Then I hit print. I walked to the kitchen, pulled the magnet off the side of the fridge that once held the old company org chart, and replaced it with the post. Underneath, I wrote in permanent marker, "Let's see who shows up when I finally claim myself." The boardroom felt colder than usual that morning, but maybe the chill wasn't in the air, it was in the way no one met my eyes. In the way even my own hands trembled slightly as I rested them on the polished table. I hadn't said a word since entering. Neither had my attorney. He sat to my left, calm and unreadable, dressed in a charcoal suit that carried the weight of seriousness, of truth. Across the table, Orion looked far too comfortable for someone who should have been nervous. One leg crossed over the other, fingers steepled in forced ease, lips curled just enough to make me want to walk out before it even began. But I stayed seated. I waited until the room settled, until the eyes on me began to shift from curiosity to discomfort. Then, slowly and deliberately, I laid down 5 sealed envelopes, one in front of each board member. The shuffle of paper was the only sound for a moment. "Elgin," I said quietly, addressing the oldest board member directly. "You once told me something I've never forgotten. You said, paper only matters when someone else can read it. So I brought copies. They looked down. Some blinked. Others opened their envelopes without hesitation. Inside were the certified documents, the amended version of our late father's will, the one submitted quietly 2 years ago, the one that removed my name entirely from the ownership clause, without my knowledge, without my consent, the one that conveniently transferred majority shares of Anderson Group to Orion and Isolde. I never signed off on this, I said clearly. And I was never notified this revision even existed. Orion's composure cracked ever so slightly. He adjusted his tie and cleared his throat. "This feels like a misunderstanding. You know how these legal documents are. The phrasing, there's always room for interpretation." "No," I replied, my voice steady and low. "What you misunderstood is that paper leaves trails." I tapped the table twice. My attorney reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small speaker. He pressed play. The boardroom, still stiff and cold, was suddenly filled with Orion's voice, confident, smug, from the last closed-door stakeholder meeting. "Sometimes it's hard to take criticism seriously when it's emotionally charged," he had said. The second recording followed immediately. Isolde's voice, clipped and dismissive. Don't make it bigger than it is. It's done. When the final audio faded, I handed out one last documenté printout of a viral LinkedIn post. No names were mentioned in the post, but it had over 400,000 shares, tens of thousands of comments. Anonymous, yes, but everyone in the industry knew exactly who it was about. The room was silent. You could hear the hum of the AC, the soft shuffle of someone's nervous foot beneath the table. No one rushed to apologize. No one argued. But something shifted. Then, finally, a voice broke through. An older board member, soft-spoken, respected, and rarely involved in conflict, cleared his throat. "We owe you more than we've ever admitted," he said, "and perhaps more than we can repay." Orion didn't say a word, not even to deny it. I stood, my hands no longer trembling. "You don't need to fix what you broke," I said. "You just need to stop pretending it never happened." No one tried to stop me as I left. Downstairs, someone had planned a birthday celebration for Orion. Cupcakes, gold balloons, and an awkward rendition of Happy Birthday rising from the open floor. I walked through it unnoticed. Or maybe just unacknowledged. A woman tried to hand me a plate with a cupcake chocolate with gold sprinkles. I took it, smiled, said thank you. Across the room, Orion was cutting into a sheet cake. His name was spelled wrong Orion. I didn't correct it. As I exited through the main lobby, I paused in front of the company sign mounted on the marble wall. Anderson Group. But not for long. I'd already submitted the facility's change order that morning. Installation was scheduled for Wednesday. The new signage would read, Anderson and Legacy Partners. When the facilities manager had asked me what Legacy Partners meant, I gave him the simplest answer I had. It means no one gets erased again. That night, I sat at home at my dining table, alone. No phones ringing, no voices justifying betrayal. Just silence, warm lighting, and the hum of my own breath. I pulled out a clean sheet of branded stationery, my branding, my name, and began writing. A single clause. Legacy isn't what we leave behind. It's what we refuse to let be rewritten. I signed it. No co-signers. No need for witnesses. Just me. That was the point. Closure doesn't always come with peace. Sometimes it arrives with boundaries, documents, and a door only you can close. And sometimes, closure doesn't need a crowd. Just a pen. And your own name, written in full. Mine. The plaque outside my office wasn't just metal. It was a mirror-sleek, brushed steel, no name in bold font. Just a quiet logo, etched deep with intention. And if they came looking for answers, they'd see their reflection first. But not everything needed to be reflected anymore. Some things could stay behind the glass. Not hidden, just no longer invited in. 2 weeks had passed since the boardroom fell silent, and the news broke like glass under pressure. Long enough for headlines to fade, for inboxes to return to normal, for LinkedIn posts to cycle out of relevance. I didn't clarify anything. I didn't write a thread or repost articles. I let the buzz settle and the whispers take over. People always filled in the blanks with whatever made them most comfortable. Let them. While they speculated, I built. My new office didn't look like mush, at least not to them. A second-floor loft tucked just south of downtown. Exposed beams, tall windows, uneven wood floors, and no receptionist. No Art Deco lobby. No sleek conference rooms with glass tables, just clarity. Inside, the space was open, still half empty. ID furnished it slowly, deliberately. A deep green velvet couch it found secondhand, but loved instantly. A standing desk I had assembled myself over one too late night. A coffee pot that only made enough for one. And a single frame hung neatly on the brick wall above the desk. Inside the frame was the viral LinkedIn post, the one that sparked everything, printed on clean, matte cardstock. Beneath the post, in my own handwriting, I'd added one line in black ink. We don't disappear, we get redrawn. It wasn't a slogan, it was a reminder. For me. For whoever came next. And they did come quietly, steadily. Not because of my last name, Not because of family legacy, but because of the work. Founders trying to rebuild after being overlooked. Women trying to re-enter spaces that had spat them out. People who didn't want motivational speeches. They wanted frameworks, systems, solutions. It was a Thursday afternoon when my phone rang. The number was familiar. Darla. "We're having a small dinner Sunday," she said. Her voice calm, rehearsed. "Just family. No agenda." I didn't respond right away. I could feel her discomfort filling the silence. "You can leave early, of course," she added quickly. "Like that might make it easier." "I'll come," I said. "But one condition." She waited. 1 hour. No company talk. No updates. Just dinner. She agreed without argument. That surprised me. Sunday came. The Wren house looked the same as it always had, tasteful, towering, untouched. But I had changed, and when I stepped through the front door, I felt the shift immediately. The dining room hadn't gotten smaller, but I no longer tried to fold myself down to fit inside it. Dinner was fine. No champagne toasts, no side glances, no backhanded jabs disguised as concern. Isolde talked about a contract she was working on for a luxury resort. Elgin asked if I was keeping busy. I told him yes. No one asked anything deeper, and maybe that was a gift. But near the end of the meal, after the plates had been cleared, Elgin excused himself and left the room. No one followed. When he returned, he was holding something, a frame. It was the gala photo, the original one, the version that still had me in it. He didn't say anything, just walked over to the wall near the staircase, the spot where the cropped version had once hung. He raised the frame, adjusted it until it was straight, then stepped back, hands at his sides. He didn't glance my way. Darla did, just for a moment. Then she turned and began gathering the last of the glasses, like nothing had happened. I didn't thank him, but I didn't look away. Later, as I helped carry a tray of dessert plates into the kitchen, Isolde brushed past me at the sink. She didn't speak, didn't apologize, didn't offer a bridge. We didn't need one. Some distances aren't meant to be crossed. At the front door, I reached for my coat. Darla stood beside me. Her hand hovered, like she wanted to say something, maybe touch my arm, but she didn't. "I'll stop expecting you to understand," I said quietly, "if you stop pretending you already do." She blinked once, then gave a small nod. Not agreement, just acknowledgement. That was enough. Back in my apartment, I turned off the overhead lights. Let the lamp by the window cast its soft glow over the hardwood floors. The city beyond shimmered quiet, alive, pulsing with energy I didn't need to chase anymore. I sat at my desk, the one I'd built with my own hands. I opened my notebook, flipped to a fresh page, and wrote, "They couldn't give me what I needed, so I became what I needed." I closed the notebook gently. Not everything had healed, but everything had moved. And for now, for the first time in a long time, that was finally, blessedly, enough.